My slice. All right, you guys ready? I'm gonna go over my slice. Let's do it. So first things first, write a function called my slice. Open up the function block, whatever. And so my slice is going to take 3 parameters, right? It's going to take, since usually you dot off an array, since this is an actual function, we can't dot off anything, right? So this one actually has to take the input array as an argument. So we could just do array here. And then we need 2 things, right? An index to start at, and then an index to stop at, or where to end at, whatever. So we can do start and stop. Okay. So you guys have worked with the slice method before, but for strings, right? Yeah, what's up?
What do you mean when you say dot off?
Like, you know how you dot off a string, like this dot to uppercase,
Oh, yeah.
dot to up. When I say dot off of something, it's like dot a function, Array dot slice.
We can't use that.
Yeah, you could use it. Yeah, slice is also an array method as well.
Right now, in this one.
No, you're actually writing that method. We'll talk about methods tomorrow. But yeah, so in this case, we're going to take the array and we're going to tell it to start somewhere and we're going to tell it to stop somewhere. Okay? And then return a new array of that. So the first thing you have to watch out for is what if somebody just puts in the array and not a start and stop index, right? And that could happen because if you just do array.slice, it just returns the copy of the array. It just returns the entire array. Starts at 0, goes to the end, right? So, and you might be thinking, well, why not first check for the stop index? Because if start isn't here, stop isn't here. If you're passing in one thing, everything after that will be undefined, right? So you could just state right here, if start is equal to undefined, we can just set the start equal to 0. Because you're going to want to go, you're going to want to start at 0 if you don't pass in a start index, right? Is everyone good on this?
Where you can just put it as the default.
You can do that too. You can say, instead of doing all this stuff, ES6 provides you a way to do this instead. This is no longer necessary. What you're doing when you're defining your function and you're putting the parameter in here, if you put just the parameter, okay, it expects something, and if you don't pass anything, it will be undefined. But if you do that parameter equals something, if that thing is never passed in, it will be equal to what this is. So if I just pass in an array, start will be 0. That's a shorthand way of doing that if statement. And this is a little cleaner, right? Is anyone confused by that? This is just saying if you don't pass in a start, it's going to be 0. That's what that is. And you could actually do the same thing for the stop, right? Stop, if you don't pass this in, it will be array dot length. Right? Because if you don't tell slice where to stop, slice will go until the array has no more indexes. Right? So if you don't pass in an end index, you're going to just assign it to the length of the array. Now, yeah, what's up?
Why not array dot length minus 1? Does it just go 1 index beyond?
This does go 1 index beyond, but for the for slice, you want to include, I think, the index that you're stopping at. It can be -1. It's just the for loop will be different later. It's like one or the other. I'll show you. So then you have to check one more thing, right? Because if you guys recall, if you do console.log of an array of 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, right? And you do dot slice of -1. What? Did I do? Oh, this was just in the comments. So my bad. You got the last thing, right? So slice can actually take in a negative number. So instead of like trying to think about it in your head, like, okay, well, if it's negative, we got to start from the back and then loop through the back. You know, you can just change what start is. You know, you can just change what it is, and then we could change it to like if start. Well, first you check if start is less than 0, right? So if it's negative, you could just say start is equal to original. Array. Array.length minus start. Oh, plus start. That's not how negatives work. Oh my god. So, like in this example up here, if you pass in -1, the length of this is 3, right? Right? So, in this scenario, if -1 is here, then we will change this -1 to the length 3 plus the start, which is -1, which is 2. So we're telling it to start at index 2, 0, 1, 2 is 3. You're not telling it to stop anywhere, so all you get is 3, the last thing, in a new array. Is everyone okay with that? Like, instead of like going from the back of the array and writing a bunch of logic to like go backwards and like it'll just be a giant function, we can just change this to a positive number instead of a negative number at the correct place. Because if this was -2, we would get 2, 3. Because the length of this array is 3 plus -2 is 1, so we're going to start at index 1. And index 1 is 2, so we start at 2. You don't tell it to stop anywhere, so you get 2, 3. So this logic will work, okay? Is everyone okay? Okay. So then we have to check if the end index, where to stop, is less than 0, right? So we could say if end is less than 0, we can do the same thing. End will be equal to original, not original, array dot length plus end. And this isn't end, this is stop, my bad. What the hell? And it's the same logic as up here, because it works in the same way. It goes from the back of array. -1 will always be the last element in the array, right? So it'll be the same logic. You just want to tell it where to stop from the back, counting from the back if you pass in a negative number. So we'll just turn it into a positive number so we could treat everything the same way in the rest of our function. Does it make sense to check these? To do this check, right? This simplifies things. Because if we just do these two simple checks, the rest of the function is just for positive numbers. We don't have to write like all this like weird for loop logic to account for negative and positive numbers. Yeah. Oh, sorry, this is supposed to be stop. My bad. Okay? Cool. So now, since we want to return a new array, a copy of the array, we could just say let copy array equal to this, right? Similar to how you guys have been doing with empty strings and plus equaling to it the whole time and adding things from the back, it's going to be the same kind of shebang, but we're going to push things into it, okay? So let's write a for loop, and we're going to set, okay, what are we going to set I to? Not 0, right?
Start.
It's going to be the start index, right? Because that's what this entire function is doing. So I is going to be equal to start. And then we're going to go until I is less than what?
Stop.
Exactly. And we will do this, and we will increment I every time. And then we could just do copy array dot push array of I. And then we could just return copy array. So then if you call my slice with that same thing, 1, 2, 3, and we'll tell it to start at 1 and not pass anything in, we'll get 2, 3. If we tell it to start at 2, we get 3. It's return. Oh, this is console logging. That's my bad. We get 3. Right? We get 3. And if we get 0, if we don't pass anything in, we just get the whole array. And if we pass in a negative number, we'll get 3. And if we say -2 to -1, we'll get 2. Okay? This was a little tricky because you have to account for negative numbers and you have to kind of write a different for loop than most of you might be used to. Like usually you just start at 0, you loop through the whole thing, do some stuff, return some stuff, whatever. But this we're telling you, the start and stop index is actually telling you how to write your for loop. Like the person who's calling the function, who's throwing these things into it, they're saying, okay, your for loop in this function is going to be like this. So we have to listen to that, and that's where we start and stop. Any questions? I'm a little sick, so bear with me. Okay. Does anyone want me to do another question? Question number what? Question number 3? What's question number 3? Oh, the zoo inventory? Yeah, I'm down. Let me just see. Let me just read the README real quick. Oh, okay. Okay, word. So, this question, I feel like looks complicated, but it's actually pretty simple if you just think about it, you know? So, let me just copy this this example here. So, in the zoo inventory problem, the input is always going to be something that looks like this. It will always be an array of inner arrays. And inside of the inner array, the first index will be the name, and the second index will be another array. And inside of that other array, what do we know? 3 levels deep. The first index of that, the 0th index of that, will be the type of animal, and the first index will be its age. And this is just a universal truth for this problem, okay? So what they want you to do is they want you to take this multi-dimensional array and make it still an array of arrays, but this array will now be a sentence. That makes logic of this, you know? So how do we do that? So we do const zoo inventory is going to be equal to a function. I'm just going to do it like this so you guys can just kind of get used to seeing functions written like this. And this is going to take an array. So now we will say let's results array, and that's going to be equal to this array. So let I equal to 0, I is less than array dot length I plus plus. I automatically set up a result array, and I automatically wrote a for loop. Because I know that this, we're going to have to get everything in here, right? We're going to have to. And you might be thinking that since this is an array in here, we might have to write a second for loop. But you actually don't. Because you know that all the data that's going to be put in is going to be like this in this order. Arrays are ordered, so this won't randomly change. Unless the rules for the question is different, okay? So you can actually do this all in one line in the for loop. So you could just say results array dot push. So the current element right now will be King Kong at index 0 and at index 1 an array, right? Are you guys familiar with backticks and the $sign interpolated strings? We're going to do something like that, and it's going to be one line and it's going to look nice, okay? Well, sort of nice. So you do the backtick. The backtick, this is a string, okay? But you can also write JavaScript in here in a certain way. If you just do $sign and then open some brackets, anything in the brackets, you can put a variable in there, and then inside of the string will be the value of that variable. So, how do we get King Kong out? We're at that current array, so we could just do array at I, right? That's the current array, at 0. Because the array is referencing this entire array, right? And I is the thing that's incrementing each time in the for loop. So array at I gives us this array with King Kong and then another array. So array at I at 0 gives us the array at I, so it's at 0, and then of this of 0. So you get King Kong here, okay? And then, what does the sentence have to say? Then we can exit the curly brace, and it'll be just a part of the string. So we could just put the, right? Because the sentence has to say King Kong, the, whatever, is whatever, period, okay? I know people always forget the period, and it's really frustrating. But, you know, that's just how it goes. So you got the, and then you got another space. So now we have to find gorilla, right? So we already used, so we have to do the interpolated thing again with the $sign open curly braces, right? And inside here we can access that array, and we could go at I, because we're still at the first thing. But now instead of 0, we want 1, right? But hold on a second. This is an array. This isn't like, this is the ordered list of values. This isn't one single, well technically it is one single value, but we want the values inside of that array, right? So, if we can do array of I of 1, why can't we just put another thing there? Array of I of 1 of 0. And that goes deeper into it, okay? Because this is going one level down with I, then another level into this array with the 1, and then accessing this element gorilla will give us, we use with the 0 over here. So, array of I of 1 of 0 will give us type of animal, species. Do you guys say species or species? What's right? Do you guys know?
Maybe both. Like girl with the
All right. I'm just curious. But okay. So after that, we need space is. I'll just put the period in right now so I won't forget. But before the period, we need the age, right? So we could just do the same thing: dollar curly bracket, curly braces, and we could just do array at I at 1, but we don't want at 0. Now we want at 1. We want the next value. This will always be at the 0th index. This will always be at the first index. And even though that this is a number, right? This is a number type. This isn't a string type. So, but this is all going into a string, so it coerces that number into a string. Okay? And then we could just return the results array. So if we uncomment this and we do, this is going to look weird. Okay. So if we do zoo inventory of my zoo, right? We'll console.log it. King Kong the gorilla is 42. Nemo the fish is 5. Whatever Phil the groundhog is 11. Who wants me to walk through this again? Awesome. So, the input value is an array of arrays. And inside those arrays, there's a string and then another array, right? That's what's always going to be inside of this. Okay? So, we first set that result array to an empty array here, right? Because we know that we want to return a new one of new data. So this is easy. We can make the data that goes at each index and just push it in. And we could do this in one line. And it's this line right here, right? Wait, let me just do this. Array at I at 1 at 1 will give us H. So this entire value inside here, right? This is just one string. So that whole thing can go inside of the push. Okay? So we could just, and since we want one string at each index, that's pretty much the only logic we need inside this for loop. Ignore the comment. This is the only line we really need. So we could just do result array dot push, and then you get the backticks, and then you write the string. And the way you put variables that you can grab from that for loop into a string using backticks is $ curly brace. And anything inside those curly braces, it won't be a string that says, like, if you just made these regular quotes, you get some crazy nonsense, right? It's actually the actual characters that you're writing. But using backticks, if you use $bracket, anything inside there, so array at I at 0 is an actual variable, right? So that variable at the first point in time will be King Kong. So it will be King Kong V, right? And the way we get King Kong is the first iteration of the for loop, I is 0, right? So we take this array, because it's accessing the input array here, right? So array at I, and I is 0, so you just get this. This is array at 0. But then array at 0 is this, right? Array at 0 is this, King Kong, and array at 0 at 1 is this array. Right? So, array at I at 0, each time, when array is 0, when array is 1, when I is 0, 1, 2, whatever, it will always give us this first thing. Always. So this is always going to be accurate. Agree? Agree? So now, what do we do about array at I at 1? Right? If array at I is always going to be each of these big arrays, and the 0th thing will always be the first thing, then the first index will always be the next thing. But that's an array. So array at I at 1 will give us an array. So this array at I at 1 is actually equal to this array. So this array at 0, you get gorilla. That at 0, you will get the species of animal. So you can just put that in here, inside another $sign with curly braces. Yeah.
What did you print the 3 sentences without being an array? Use red?
What do you mean the 3 sentences without it being in an array?
Well, like just
Oh, just like,
I thought they wanted us to print the array.
I don't think, yeah, you can't do that. I think if you do this, no. Does this work? No. Yeah, I don't really know. If you wanted to flatten the array, yeah, you can't do. If you wanted just like one long sentence, you would actually have to go in and add all those values together because everything in the array is a separate value, right?
Well, how would you print each sentence on a separate line, not have the brackets in it?
Oh, well, you can't return like result array and like this and like 2 and 3 or whatever, you know? So you have to like loop through it and kind of like return each thing at that index. You know what I mean? Yeah. So is everyone okay on this?
So it seems like the key was just recognizing
Well, what?
It seems like the key was just recognizing what the arrays are.
Well, that's definitely okay. Yeah. So that I feel like that does confuse a lot of people sometimes. Like the thing that will always be put into it will always be in this format. That's like the main key. And if you know that, like if you read the test specs and see that's what's going on, then you could automatically just go and do this, right? Because if this was in a different order, like if this top array had the array first, and this one, Nemo, was where the 5 was, and 5 is where Nemo was, there's no way, like, okay, you can check and see what's a number, but you can't check and see, the computer can't tell you if fish is a species and Nemo is a name, right? It can't tell you that. It just sees strings. These are just strings. So you wouldn't, if they're not in the same order, you would never know.
So would you have to do 2 for this?
No, I'm just saying, like, you would never know. I mean, if you didn't want to do it this way, but you still knew that it was name, array, type, number, then you would do another for loop and then do that, you know?
Or if like the sub array like every element.
That's the thing.
You're not gonna like do this.
Well, that's the thing, you know? Like, yeah. Like, you wouldn't know, like, if you want a string that's this, but there's, like, other elements, like, if you look through it, then you'll never get this, you know? You can't tell, well, that's not the string I'm looking for, because this one has 5 ages. I mean, you could check and see, like, okay, if there's, like, a million things in here, just check the first 2. But what if the first 2 aren't right, you know? What if the first 2 are actually, like, an object or something? So for this specific problem, the actual input has to be the same. But objects will kind of solve the problem that this is going for. Because you see, this is pretty much a zoo, right? But, like, if you have a zoo as one, like, thing, one concept, right? But you wanted to store a bunch of information about that zoo, right? Arrays are kind of difficult to do that, but objects are actually make things like that very simple. Okay? So let's start the lecture on objects, and then I'm gonna want to give you guys a little extra time to go through the workshop, because objects are very important. And they're also, in my opinion, I like them better than arrays, because they just make more sense to me personally. And I think they're more useful. Well, not really. I mean, they're equally useful, but I just like working with them better, I guess. So, objects 1. Let's get into it. Jesus. Oh my god. Okay. Const my zoo, right? Let's do this again. Let's keep the zoo thing going. I like animals. We're going to set this equal to an empty object. That is an empty object. It's just open and closed curly braces, okay? That's what an object is. So, if we console log type of my zoo, we get object, right? A curly brace is just how you write an empty object. But what, I keep saying object, right? What is an object? An object is an unordered data structure of key value pairs, okay? And in JavaScript, so let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say, like this way? Oh, this way? Okay. So let's say, so let's put something, let's not have like an empty object, right? Let's put one key value pair. So we can do king will be the line. So the way you put a key value pair in here is its key is the thing to the left of the colon, space, any type of value. Okay? This string right here, lion, is actually, could actually be anything. It could be an array, right? It can even be another object. Whatever, you know? So, objects are simply key value pairs. The key is on the left and the value is on the right. So why might you think this is like useful or interesting? It's because you can store as many things as you want in here, and you don't have to worry about indexes like, oh, what's that index 25? No, what is MyZoo's king? And how do you do that? You just say console.log MyZoo at king. And then you get lion. So, a couple things I want to show you guys about this example right here. MyZoo is this object, correct? Correct? MyZoo is the object. I did not use any quotation marks to define the key. That's okay. You don't have to. But remember this. In JavaScript, the keys of objects are always strings. Okay? They're all strings. But when you're actually defining things, you don't have to put that there. You can just leave the quotes out. However, you do need the quotes if you have like invalid characters that would be keys, you know? So like if it was like king of jungle, it's the same thing. But it has to be in the string quotes because you have a space, you know? If you remove these, like this, JavaScript is throwing an error because you have a space and it's not a string, so it's thinking there are three different like variables here, and JavaScript's like, what are you doing, you know? So this has to be in a string if you want to use that. But when you're defining these objects and stuff, you don't actually have to put in the quotes for the key. You can just write whatever you want, and it makes a little bit more sense, right? The king is the lion, and then we'll add another property, and the way you add another property to an object, you can just do comma number of animals. I will say 5. So if you console.log MyZoo at number of animals, you have 5, right? It's the same thing as the king. To access something inside of this object, you just say that object, use brackets, and then put the string name of that key. Now, I'm going to show you something even more simple than putting the actual string name of the key in brackets. You can just get rid of the string and do dot number of animals, and that works too. This is called dot notation versus bracket notation. Bracket notation, you put in a string of the actual name of the key, and then you get its value, because objects are key value pairs. Right? But with dot notation, you take the object, MyZoo, you put the dot there, and then it takes everything to the right of the dot, literally whatever you write, and we'll just make it a string. That's essentially what's going on. I love dot notation because it's quick, right? MyZoo dot number of animals, easy. Kind of like off an array, you do dot slice and then do whatever, right? It's kind of the same thing, okay? But there is a main difference between bracket and dot notation. So let's say you have a variable, let king of jungle, no. Let Simba's type equal to, no, wait, hold on a second. Let monarch equal to a string king, right? I'm just making a variable called monarch, and it's equal to a string king. King, this string king is also a key in MyZoo. So, you can actually do console.log my zoo bracket monarch, not in a string. And you can do this because monarch is a string, right? And then you get line again. However, if you try to do a dot off of a variable, you get undefined. Can anybody guess as to why that's happening? No guesses.
Just that monarch isn't king. Like it was king when you could do it, but it was monarch because it's monarch.
Yeah, because the dot is saying whatever to the right, I'm making that into a string and looking for a key in that object. So JavaScript is looking for a key of monarch in this object, not king. Because the dot ignores what variables are equal to, right? It just says, literally, oh, you wrote monarch here, there must be a key monarch. But if there is no key, you get undefined. Is this making sense? Sort of. Yeah? It's a little okay? See, objects are just kind of like you can put a bunch of things in here of any data type, like arrays. Arrays can hold arrays can hold objects and numbers and booleans and whatever. So can objects. And the reason I like objects more than arrays is because it's very, very fast to look up a value of a key. You know? That takes almost no time. But for arrays, you just have a bunch of indexes. So kind of there's no real way, if you have like a lot of stuff to organize, there's no real way to look for specific types of data, right? Whereas as in here, we can have like mammals. Here we can have reptiles. And here we could have birds, right? And birds will be an array: sparrow, eagle, vulture. Reptiles can be lizard, crocodile, up in a string, and turtle. And in mammals, we could have lion, chimpanzee, and elephant. And in arrays, like we would, if these arrays were in an array, not an object, we wouldn't have that key identifier, right? We would just have its index, it's 0. And you'd have to know, okay, in this array, at index 0, I'm going to put all the mammals. At index 1, I'm going to put all the reptiles. In index 2, I'm going to put all the birds. But here, we could just do myzoo.birds, and you just get all the birds, right? It's very intuitive. It's better for storing large types of data that are specific, you know? Like, this is a zoo object. It's more descriptive. This is my zoo. Inside my zoo, I have mammals, reptiles, and birds. And what kind of animals do I have of those, right? They're just arrays, like that. So I think that it's more intuitive, in my opinion. But there's other things that you can use to see. Like, let's say you wanted to check, but you didn't want to say like, okay, myzoo.amphibians, right? Amphibians, right? This is going to be undefined. If you try to access a key of an object that doesn't exist in that object, you're going to get undefined, right? But like, what's the point of checking something that like we're expecting a result of undefined? I mean, You could. I do that all the time. But like you could also do amphibians. I think it has to be a string. Amphibians in my zoo. False. So you could do the string, the key you're looking for, and you could use this keyword in. In my zoo. It takes this string, in does, it takes this string, goes through my zoo, and checks and sees if there's an object, and a key in there that is the same as what you're putting, right? And it returns true or false. So if I did birds, you get true. It's like logic. It's pretty simple to understand, right? Is this in this? Yes, that is true. Is this in this? And then you get false, you know? It just looks through the object, accesses the key for you, and returns true or false instead of undefined. I think you need to put it in quotes, though. Yeah. Okay. This needs to be in quotes, though. Because on the console.log, JavaScript is going to stop at birds if it wasn't in quotes, and it's going to try and see what birds is equal to. So if you let then that works too, if it was in a variable. But otherwise it has to be in strings. Because keys are actually strings. So, you might be saying like, okay, that's cool. Sick, Marco, like no one cares, you know? Like no one cares about this. Because we can't loop through these things. But you can loop through objects. Okay? But you don't use a regular for loop or a while loop. Use a for in loop. Okay? And that looks very similar to a regular for loop. First you define something, right? And since these are key value pairs, the thing that you will be defining is the key. So we could just say let key in my zoo. So, just like a for loop, when you say let I equals 0, you're declaring like not a variable that's going to increment, but a variable that will store the key value of the object. The for in loop goes through every single key value pair inside of that object. So, if you just console log the key, and I just call the key, right? I could call this species. And then I'll console log species, and we'll get the same thing, right? This is just a variable that you're declaring. So, but my zoo, this second argument, has to be an actual object. Because it's going to be looking through one object, right? So this is a way to get the keys. So if you wanted the values, and here you have the values, right? An array of all these things. And notice that I used bracket notation here. Bracket notation pretty much always has to be used inside of a for in loop. Because dot notation will literally take species and look for a key species in this object. But that's not what we want, because each iteration of the for in loop, species will have a different value, right? It's going to be mammals, then it's going to be birds, and then it's going to be reptiles. So that's why we use bracket notation. Without quotes, because with quotes, species will just be the string species, and it'll be the same thing as dot notation. Okay? Does that make sense? No? Doesn't make any sense? Or a little sense? What's up? Hmm? It's not. Yeah, sorry. You notice the let keyword?
Yeah.
Let species. I'm defining something new as species. And since this is a for in loop, this is saying let species in my zoo, right? So this word species, what I'm saying, is going to be at every iteration will be equal to every key, right? It will go through all the keys. And if you get the key, and if you get every key, you can get every value. So if I have every value in here, and every value is an array, right? So I could just do a for loop, not door loop, for loop equals 0, I is less than my zoo at species dot length I plus plus console.log my zoo at species at I. So now that I have the array, right, my zoo at species at that point of time will be mammals. So I get an array of mammals, and that's console log here. Since it's an array, it's just like an array, right? So you could loop through that and get every element here. My zoo at species at I. If you wanted to make things more clear, I don't really do this, but I guess it's more readable. You could just say let species equal. No, wait, you can't because I already. Let's write this. Let's change this to key. I usually say let key because it's a key value pair, but you can name that whatever you want. Sometimes it usually makes more sense to name it with what the data structure actually is. But if you wanted to, I mean, what the key is actually representing. But if you wanted to like pull it out so you don't have to do my zoo at species at I, you could just say let species is going to be equal to my. No, this goes up here. Let species is set this equal to my zoo at key, right? So here we could do species, and we know that species is an array. So now we could just console log species at I, and you get this. This may seem like very strange to you, but it makes a lot of sense, right? We loop through. You guys accept the fact that there's something called a for in loop and it's used to loop through objects, right? You get every key so you can access every value. Because in an object, you have key value pairs. Two things, the key and whatever its value is. It could be a string, a number, a boolean, undefined, null, false. I said boolean. Could be an array, it could be objects, right? So in my zoo, all of the values are arrays. So if I have this, I could pull it out, right? And put it into this variable species. Then I could just loop through that, and I could get every element here. Right? Anybody sign a life? Is this all right? All right.
Well, that's basically, it was just easier to do the word is species. What species?
No, I mean, this is just, so like, this is just personal preference, right? Some people don't like doing my zoo at key at I, right? Some people just don't like doing, like how I solved this problem here. Who laughed? Yeah, I know, this is ridiculous, but like, some people just don't like this because this is just nonsense, right? You're just saying like array at 0 at 1 at I, you know? But I don't know, in my head that makes more sense. So instead of doing something like that, you can say, okay, well, at every So if you have like nested for loops, you know the element at I is going to be something, right? So you could pull that out and put it into a variable that makes sense. And I know in this specific case, in my object, it's going to be a species, right? Well, not really, but class or whatever. But so I just say species is equal to my zoo at key, and you get mammals, and reptiles, whatever. So then when I reference it down here inside of the next for loop, it makes more sense. But I guess I just realized that these aren't really species at all. Yeah. One more thing I want to go over before I go into the slides is you guys remember how we coerce values into strings and numbers and stuff using the global number object and the global string object? Well, there's a global object. It's the same thing. It has, you could dot off it, and it has a lot of built-in methods. And one that is very good, that is used a lot, instead of doing doing a for-in loop, getting all the keys, pushing them into an array. If you want all the keys in an array, which you probably will eventually, you could just do object.keys and then pass in the object. Object.keys. Object.keys. What the fuck? Oh, object.keys. My bad. Object.keys returns an array of all of the keys. Of all the keys in the object you pass into it, right? It's just dot keys off the global object. And you invoke keys. And what you pass keys is an object. And what you get is an array of all the keys in that object. In an array. Okay, it's in an array. So that's another thing that's pretty useful. That I'm sure you guys will find some use for. Oh yeah. So let's say that we have my zoo, right? And let's move my zoo down here. There's no amphibians in here. But I got some frogs. I got some toads. I got some salamanders, you know? They're in my zoo. So how do I put that in this object without doing anything weird? It's really simple, you know? You just do my zoo dot amphibians equals whatever you want, you know? In this case, it'll be frogs, frog, toad, and salamander. And then, so I'll console log my zoo here, and I'll console.log my zoo here. Oh, that's kind of atrocious to read. But we got mammals, reptiles, birds before we do that dot notation. But then we have amphibians down here. And that's how easy it is to add a new key value pair into your object. You can literally just do dot whatever you want the key to be, set it equal to whatever you want it to be. And it doesn't have to be a dot. If we say let amphibians equal to a string amphibians, right? Then this could be bracket notation too. And it's going to be the same thing. We have amphibians here still. And that's how you add something to an array. To an object. this works the same way as if for reassigning. So I just said amphibians.birds is now going to be equal to frog, toad, salamander. And that's what happened. There's no more amphibians key. I'm saying .birds is going to be equal to this new array. So that's how you reassign in an object too. It's the same thing as, it's the same way you access something, right? With bracket notation or dot notation. If you console.log some myzoo.birds, like if you console.log myzoo.birds, that's a value, right? It's an array. It's right here. Birds is right here. So if you just say myzoo at amphibians at something that doesn't exist inside the object, it doesn't matter. It will just put it inside of the object and set its value equal to whatever. So if we just do this dot amphibians now, we get what it is, right? It's very simple. And you guys will get the hang of it very quickly, I promise. If this seems like weird, it won't be, okay? Are there any questions that you want me to show you before we go into the slides? So,
What if we wanted to console log just like it including amphibians in the beginning? So we just console log my zoo, see what
console log, wait, where?
So like when you console log my zoo.amphibians, you just get the frog, toad, salamander, but what if I wanted amphibians on the but not the other sections?
But not the other sections?
Yeah, because if you just console log my zoo, you get mammals, and then all the mammals, reptiles, all that stuff. What if I just wanted to be like reptiles and lizards? Is there a way to like have both parts in there?
No, actually. I mean, you would just have to, okay, so you would just have to, like, in this, if you did like a for in loop, I guess, if you do like let key in my zoo, and you console.log oh shit. And you could say like if key is equal to amphibians, console.log key plus this plus my zoo at key. So you could do it like that. But there's like, I think there's also I never do this. Yeah, there's also object.values too. So if you wanted to, instead of doing something like this, you can do like objects. You get the picture, right? Object.keys of my zoo and object.values of my zoo. and then you could get like these arrays.
You would
But
get all of them.
huh?
You would get all of them.
Yeah, you would get all of them, so you'd have to check and see like which ones were. Object.values is the same thing as object.keys, except to get the values in an array. Boom. So that's simple. Yeah.
And you can't, keys are unique, right? You can't make a set.
Exactly. Keys are unique. So like I said before, if you're trying to reassign something here, right? Can you guys see this alright? If you're trying to reassign something like here, right? MyZoo add amphibians, that doesn't exist in the object. So what puts it in the object? And then it assigns it to that value. But if that key already existed in there, it's going to override it. Okay? There can't be two of the same key in an object. That's just not how it works. All the keys have to be unique. I think this can even be. Right. So you can even make a key an actual number, like a type of number, but it'll just interpolate it into a string. I mean, not interpolate, coerce it into a string. Because all keys in JavaScript are strings. Okay? Yeah. If it's an array, yeah. Because arrays hold many values, right? So, yes, but like, yeah. A value into the key, like change the key, like change mammals to mammals with 5 mammals or something. Like, yeah, you can, because so down here. So if we have console.log MyZoo at mammals. Fuck. What is this? Mammals? My bad. Dot mammals. This is kind of like saying array at 0, right? You get a value from that. So if you do MyZoo dot a key, you're getting a value. So MyZoo dot mammals equals this, right? So if we say we could just do MyZoo at mammals dot push. What's another mammal? Tiger. And then here we can console.log MyZoo dot mammals. And then tiger gets added. It's the same thing as any other like array, right? Once you get that value, you can do something to it. you can change it, you can add to it, you can delete it, you can reassign it, you could do whatever. I think if you just, what is it? It's like, I never do this, but I think like my zoo delete mammals? No. There's something, I can't remember. Never mind. There's a... Oh, it's like that. So, if you do like delete my zoo at dot mammals, and then you console.log my zoo, mammals isn't in there anymore. So you could use the delete keyword too, like that. If you just wanted to delete the whole thing. Well, the whole key value pair to remove it from the object. You could do that. Huh? Here? Oh, here? I don't think you can actually. Oh, wait. Oh. I guess you can. It's not throwing an error. I thought for a second, cool. So it looks for the other dot, I guess, and then it does whatever you want with it. Hmm? Yeah, you can, yeah, with dot notation. You do the same thing. Yeah.
In this case, you're using push because the value is a string.
No, it's an array.
It's an array?
Yeah.
But what if it was a string?
If it was a string, then what would happen if you did a string of my zoo dot push? Yo. Nothing, you know?
So you have to be aware of the type of the value.
Yeah, for sure. Which you will be, right? You're getting some kind of data in. You're probably going to know what kind of data that is. And you're going to want to know how to handle it, right? So normally you would be aware that what you're working with, what the values are key, are like what the types they are, you know? Like if we made a person object, let's person equal an object and its age was 12, I'll make it my age, 24. The name and boy will be true. Right? So this is, well, this will be like is male. So like these keys are descriptive, right? This person object has an age property. When you think age, it's probably going to be a number, right? When you think name, it's probably going to be a string. When you think is male or is whatever, like is this true, it's probably going to be a Boolean. So naming your keys in objects is also important. Like I said mammals before, right? Mammals plural, meaning there's more than one mammal. So it's probably going to be a list of something. Right? Naming things is important. I feel like people overlook that a little bit, but naming things is very important. Like even like every day on the job, sometimes I just name things that the guy I work with is just like, what are you doing? Yeah. But it happens. So let's go to some slides, right? So in this, I will quickly go over what is an object, why are objects useful, the type of object, accessing, adding, changing, deleting values, the in operator for in loops, object.keys, and then nested arrays and objects. So an object is a collection of key value pairs. Like I said before, so like arrays, objects store values, but instead of storing them in numeric indices, objects store values in string keys. So, like here, you have an array of two things and an object with two key value pairs. If you do my array at 0, you get value 1, right? And if you do my object at a string of key 1, you'll get value 1. Is everyone okay with that? Cool. So, why are objects useful? Consider representing Pusheen the cat as an array. So, you have this array, it's set to a variable called Pusheen, and it has a string, a number, and another string. We as humans can see that Pusheen is probably the name, 7 is probably the age, and this sentence is just like a little description, right? We as humans can see that. But if we were just getting this, if this array was just being thrown in from somewhere, we didn't know that what was in it, right? We wouldn't know what index everything is at, right? So in this is more descriptive. In this object, this is more descriptive. Pusheen now has a name property, an age property, and a color property. So when you read .color, you know it's going to be this. When you read .age, you know it's going to be 7, and .name will be Pusheen. It makes sense, right? Objects are more descriptive in how they store information, right? Depending on how you name their keys. If you name their keys, you can name them whatever you want. So if you name them something ridiculous, you're gonna get, you know what I mean? But it's definitely more descriptive than just having numbered indices. So type of object is obviously an object, and they're just curly braces. That's the main thing, right? We call this an object literally. When you just write, when you just make an object like that, you know? So creating an object using curly braces, and an object's keys are always strings, but you can actually omit the quotation marks. But you need the quotation mark if you have spaces or something, okay? I forgot the actual list of characters that will throw an error if you try to define a key without using quotes, but it's more than a space. So if you're making any wacky characters in a key, just put it in quotes, and you should be fine. Okay. So, like I said before, accessing a value, you can use bracket notation, and you could just say Pusheen add bracket a string name. That will look for a key of name inside of that object. And since it's a string, it's the same thing as accessing indexes in an array, right? Bracket 0, bracket 1, bracket I, whatever. But now we're actually putting in a string value, because keys are strings. So this is name, age, color, and then not a key in the object. You get undefined. If you try to access a value of a key that's not in there, right? If key value pair is not in there, if you try to access that key in an object, you get undefined. Okay? You can also, with bracket notation, put in a variable. Let key to check equal name. So Pusheen at key to check will be Pusheen, because key to check is equal to a string name. You could even do this. A string call plus a string or. Call plus or is color, right? So you can even do this inside of bracket notation. And you get gray and tabby. It's the same thing. But you can't do that with dot notation. Dot notation literally looks for everything after the period and puts it into a string and looks for that, right? So dot name there is something named in here, so you get Pusheen. Same thing with dot age and color. You get what you want. But if you have a variable key to check is equal to name, right? But if you do Pusheen dot key to check, it's undefined. That's because the dot is telling JavaScript to say, look for a key that says key to check. Literally a string that says key to check. And it's not in there, so you get undefined. So if you want to access something by variable, like in a for-in loop, you're going to want to use bracket notation. Yeah. Yes, if the key is like always changing, you need to use bracket notation, you know? I usually do use bracket notation. But like dot notation is easier. So sometimes I use dot notation if I know what it is, you know? Because we'll get into this more tomorrow, but objects can also hold functions. What? Yeah, they can. We'll get into this tomorrow. But like objects can also hold functions. And functions you're not going to really want to have more of or like loop through and access values, right? So if you just do this dot something, it's just like easier. Let's use dot notation. Like, I think you have to. I don't know. Well, like array, like object dot keys, like keys is a function that is on the global object, right? That's what those things are, like array dot push, dot to uppercase. Those are all functions on the global object, right? Strings and arrays or whatever. But we'll get into that tomorrow. Don't worry about that. But like, yeah, like if you're doing something that is looping through these keys, and the key is always going to be changing, use brackets. So you could just use bracket. You should be using brackets anyway because you should be accessing keys with variables anyway. Because you never really will know the name of a key. Like if, you know what I mean? Unless you see the definition in front of you. That makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. Use whatever you want, honestly. It's up to you. But just know that if you try to dot off an object with the actual variable name, it's going to be looking for the variable name's key, not the variable's value. What the actual variable name is. That's what the main difference is.
Well, it's just like the same when we said monarchy and a king.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah. Someone remembered my mom. That was a while ago. Okay. So, like I showed you before, adding a key value pair to an object is incredibly easy. You can do either of these, bracket or dot. Pusheen at bracket a string sister is going to put a sister key inside this object, and you set it equal to Stormy, so you get sister Stormy. Same thing here, dot brother is Pip. For this, if I'm adding something to an object, I always use dot notation. Unless the thing is, unless this will always be something like, you know, like iterating through something. Like, pushing dot brother equals whatever is clean, and it's easy, so it looks nice. But it's that simple. It takes whatever the key is in here, even if it was never here, it puts it in there, and it assigns it to whatever you're assigning it here. Clear? This is like this is okay, right? Cool. Changing of values is the exact same thing. So, let's say we have Pusheen, and then we say Pusheen at age is now 8. We're setting it equal to 8. This is the same thing as saying, like, let one variable equals 2, and then you say one variable equals 3 on the next line. So one variable is going to be 3, right? This is the same thing. It's taking whatever this is at age, it's just reassigning it. But if you do Pusheen.age plus plus, that's a value, right? That's 8, and plus plus is shorthand for plus equals 1. So machine.age is going to be equal to machine.age plus 1. So that's why we see 9 in the console. Once you access the value by using the object's key like that, you have that value, you can do whatever you want with it. Just like I showed you pushing something into that array of mammals. It's the same thing. You can change values, and you can reassign them too, like this. Any questions? Nice. And I showed you this too. If you wanted to, you can delete an entire key value pair by doing delete machine at age, delete machine at color, and then we'll just get a single object with a single key value pair. Delete space and then the object dot or bracket whatever. Like if you console.log machine.color, you would get the value, right? So if you just delete and then try to get the value, it's the same kind of order, right? But that actually removes the key and the value from the entire object. Not bad, right? This is pretty self-explanatory. I feel like deleting, I never really do, honestly. But it's definitely there if you want to. So I also showed you this a while ago. This is kind of just saying console.log name in pushing, sadness in pushing. It's just saying, is this string in here? Is this key in this object? And it will return true or false. If that key is in the object, it returns true. If it's not in the object, it returns false. Right? This is pretty simple, right? Like, is this in this? True or false? Is this key in this object? True or false? Someone say something? Cool. So the for in loop is going to be very useful for you guys. You can loop through objects like you can loop through arrays. Using a for in loop, though, and not a for loop. First, you define the key by saying let key, right? We need to have a variable that's defined to store the key, what the key is at each iteration. And we're going to go through the whole object. The main difference here is you don't tell it when to stop. Okay? It's going to go through the whole object, and it's going to and if you do console.log key, you'll get every key in the object. Does this make sense? A for in loop. Does that make sense? Who's confused? Anybody? I feel like I'm going a little too fast. Is everybody like, okay, seriously? Just say the word and I'll explain something else in a different way. Okay. Yeah.
If you're looking for a key, we do like value machine.
If you mean if you're looking for a value?
Yeah.
No, because you're saying let value in machine and you console.log value, it's still going to be this. The for in loop will take the key and put it into whatever you're defining here. The way you get the value is doing console.log machine at key. Then you'll get the value.
We get like gray. See what gray is.
Well, if you console.logged machine at key, this would read machine 7 gray and tabby. Not just gray, the whole thing, because this is one value, right? This is one string. Okay. So, yeah, use the for and loop to loop through all of the keys in an object. So it's actually just looping through all of the keys, right? So you know what the key is. That's what you define here. And to get the value, you just do that object bracket that key, not dot, because every single time in this loop, it will be looking at this object pushing for a key, for a key that is actually key. Okay? So you need to use bracket in a situation like this, because this will be equal to whatever key is equal to in this situation. So first it'll be name, then it'll be age, then it'll be color. And you see in this console log, we have a string. Machines is the first thing you're console logging. Then the next thing we're console logging is key. So you see name, age, color. Then we console log is, and then we console log machine at key, and that's the value. Machine 7 Grand Tab. Yeah.
What if you wanted to do the second two, you wanted to put like his age was 7? How would you choose which value? If you didn't want it to be named.
Wait, say that again? Like you
So,
don't want to read.
so we have it set so it does the same thing for all the information we have. But if we wanted two sentences, the first one starts on machines, like the cat's name is machine, and then the second two we wanted his age is 7, his color is gray and tabby. How can we put? Like,
You would have to
specific-
see. You would have to know exactly that either you would have to look for this key and find out if it's name, and if it is name, then
Or
you
you
would
can just
return.
write it out.
You would have to write it out like manually, because like in objects, everything is just a value of a string and then another value, right? So there's no way to really tell what the what the string actually is. If that makes sense, you know. So you have to actually say if key is equal to name. Then we would do that, and if it's not, then we would do whatever you wanted to do. Like he is this, he is that, you know. Oh yeah, this is what I was saying before. Don't use dot notation because then you get undefined for everything. Because there is no key that's called key in here. So machine dot key is undefined. This makes sense to everyone, right? Right? This is okay, right? Oh, cool. Nice. Thanks for responding. And then we have object.keys. You have the global object dot keys. And the thing you pass into that dot keys is an entire object. So you would pass pushing into here, and you get an array of all the keys. You might be asking, what kind of situations would you use this in? Hey, maybe you'll find out in the workshop. I don't know, you know? So, you'll see. It's just like kind of a quick thing. It's kind of like, this is shorthand for doing a for in loop, and inside of the for in loop, we will be pushing all of the keys into an outer array. It's the same thing. It's just, we could just do object.keys and pass it an object instead, though. So it's faster, you know? To write ourselves. Is everyone good with object.keys? It's pretty simple, right? Just gives you an array of all the keys. Likewise, object.values gives you an array of all the values. Cool. Nested arrays. So, like I showed you before, an object, my object before had mammals, reptiles, birds, right? And their values were arrays. Those keys' values were arrays. And that's possible. Those values could even be other objects. And it could never stop. That could go on forever. The value could always be an object with a key that's values an object. And that object is a key which values it. You know what I mean? Same thing with arrays. Everything could just be in an array, right? Inside array, you know? But the main takeaway is like arrays, the values of a key value pair could be any type of data type. Strings, booleans, numbers, undefined, arrays, objects, even functions. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So, in this example right here, we define Pusheen with a siblings key. And that siblings key's value is an object. And inside that object, we have sister as a key, which values a string Stormy. And we have brother as a key with the values of Pip, the string Pip. So if we console.log Pusheen.siblings.sister, and then Pusheen.siblings.brother, we get Stormy and Pip. ... That's how you get to the bottom of it, you know? Same thing with accessing multi-dimensional arrays at 0, at 1, at 0, whatever. You can do that also with brackets here. Pusheen at siblings with the brackets, and then bracket sister. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper. But you can also use dots if you know the actual name of the key. Does that make sense? You have this object, Pusheen. Pusheen.siblings, what is that? It's not names, not siblings. Okay, so the value of siblings is another object. So if you wanted to go into that, you do Pusheen.siblings.sister. And then you get this. Is anyone confused by that? Nice. Nice. So we talked about what is an object, why it's useful, the type of, accessing, adding, changing, and deleting. I don't have to read this. You guys can see that. Are there any final questions before you take a break and I'll open up the workshop? Yo. Okay, I'll open up the workshop at like 8:25. Good job, guys. Good job sitting there and letting me yell at you. Just yell at the room. All right.